Hey everyone, in my recent videos we've been exploring how details from sources outside of the Bible support the historical accuracy of the Gospels. If the Gospel stories were legends or partly made up, they probably wouldn't line up so perfectly with outside sources, but we find that they do. If you're new here, be sure to catch up with the playlist. Today, let's jump into the proof surrounding Archelaus from Matthew's story of Jesus' childhood. Critics often brush off the stories of Jesus' birth as mere fiction, but this evidence really challenges that narrative. Matthew notes that after Herod the Great's death, Joseph and Mary took baby Jesus back from Egypt. So let's talk about timing. This was around 4 BC, and Matthew shares what happened when Joseph found Archelaus was taking over for Herod the Great in Judea. Instead of going back to Bethlehem, he decided to move his family to Galilee and settle in Nazareth instead. Here's how Matthew puts it. But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." So Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Then after being warned by God in a dream, he left for the regions of Galilee and came and lived in the city called Nazareth. So why exactly was Joseph so freaked out by the thought of going back to Judea under Archelaus' rule? Josephus, a first-century Jewish historian, gives us a peek into a wild chain of events right before and after Herod the Great died. Imagine this. Herod the Great had some guys burned alive right before his death for tearing down an eagle image in the temple. Fast forward to after Herod's death, and supporters of the executed started causing a big ruckus in the temple, mourning loudly. Herod's son Archelaus was set to take over Judea, but he didn't have Caesar Augustus' stamp of approval yet. Still, without the official go-ahead, Archelaus took it upon himself to maintain order in the temple. He sent Roman soldiers to calm the crowds mourning Herod the Great's victims, but things got out of hand, and the people ended up stoning some of the soldiers. Since this was during Passover, the crowd was massive, as Jews traveled from throughout the entire empire to participate in the feast. Worried about a rebellion, Archelaus decided to play "there's a new sheriff in town" routine and send a much larger army, including cavalry, into Jerusalem, even going as far as the temple precincts. They killed 3,000 Jews and scattered many more. Then his heralds announced that Passover was canceled. He told everyone to go home immediately. Archelaus' heavy-handed approach nearly cost him the chance to be Tetrarch of Judea, as he was too harsh with the Jews and jumped the gun on claiming his role. But he traveled to Rome and managed to convince Caesar Augustus to give him the job anyway. It's easy to imagine Joseph traveling back from Egypt to Bethlehem, hearing horror stories from people who fled Jerusalem just after Passover. After escaping one tyrant who relied on mass violence to stay in power, Joseph was not about to bring his child, prophesied to be the king of the Jews, under another ruler like Herod, namely his son Archelaus. So he hightailed it up to Galilee, where Antipas was tetrarch and he was far out of Archelaus' jurisdiction. Matthew doesn't exactly spell out why Joseph changed course. In fact, Archelaus isn't even mentioned anywhere else in the Bible. Josephus unintentionally adds depth to Matthew's story, making it more likely that what Matthew describes is based on truth rather than fiction. The timing lines up perfectly too, with references to Herod's death in both stories, which places these events around the same time as Joseph and his family returning from Egypt. Now, I'm sure that somebody's going to jump into the comments saying biblical scholars reject the whole Herod the baby killer story, but their reasons for doing so are pretty weak. They claim that it's only mentioned in Matthew's Gospel and not in Josephus' detailed accounts of Herod the Great, so they dismiss it as fiction. But should this silence make us question Matthew's account? This is a classic argument from silence. Just because there's no mention doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Josephus skips the Jews getting kicked out of Rome by Claudius, but Luke talks about it. Even major events like the rise of Rome weren't noted by Herodotus and Thucydides, as Josephus pointed out in his histories. Now, let's talk about King Herod for just a second. Josephus paints him as a paranoid mob boss, squashing any real or imagined threats to his power. He killed a high priest, his grandfather-in-law, his own wife, and 3 of his sons. He even had a bunch of Pharisees executed over prophecies that his kingdom would fall. So when the Magi mentioned the birth of the new king of the Jews, it's no wonder Herod wanted to take out the baby Jesus. Anyway, I hope you picked up some cool stuff from these series of videos on how history backs up the Gospels. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for more nuggets like these as I keep the series rolling. And again, check out the playlist to catch up. Thanks for watching.